Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today at the TLGS Transforming Libraries for Graduate Students webinar series. TLGS, the only national conference on graduate librarianship, will take place virtually on March 16th to the 17th, 2022. For more information, please see the official conference repository at https://kennesaw.edu/GradLibConference, and it will appear in our chat box as well. I'm Sheila Devaney. I'm a research and instruction librarian at the University of Georgia, and I will be your host today. Today's presentation is Too Much or Not Enough: Academic Integrity Lessons for New Graduate Students and Graduate TAs. Our presenter, Roman Kashikar, is the Computing and Information Sciences Librarian at the Wallace Library at the Rochester Institute of Technology in Rochester, New York. Roman has long worked with graduate students in both the master's and doctoral level in his primary capacity at RIT, but since 2015, he has also served as the Graduate Services Coordinator, serving as a liaison from the library to the RIT Graduate School and overseeing the whole graduate student experience at the RIT libraries.
Okay, thank you, Sheila, for that introduction, and greetings to all of you who are viewing this presentation. This was to be my Transforming Libraries for Graduate Students presentation for 2020. And of course, we all know that that meeting was canceled. Sadly, I am more than happy to have an opportunity to present this to you today and share my experiences with some of the activities I've had with preparing new graduate students who come to our campus here at RIT. Some background about my job. Sheila's introduction says, I've served as the Graduate Services Coordinator since 2015. My slide says 2016. Now, unfortunately, I can't remember exactly which year I began that role. It was sometime in that time frame. What does this role entail? I'm responsible for communications to graduate students and their advisors on publishing their theses and dissertations. That's really one of the largest roles. I provide training on citation management systems, and that training is really open to everyone at my campus, but graduate students benefit from it quite tremendously. I engage in outreach efforts to our graduate students by maintaining a liaison to RIT's graduate school. And for the purposes of this presentation, I've been asked to present at orientation events for new graduate students many times in these last 5 to 6 years. Now, I'm actually part of a department here at RIT. We have a small library on a large campus, so we all have to do 2.5 different jobs, and my primary responsibility is actually in reference and instruction and liaison work, and that is to serve as our Computing and Information Sciences librarian, and I maintain a liaison to our very large College of Computing and Information Sciences, and as well as to the graduate school. So I'm part of a team of liaison librarians, and we all work with graduate students, as well as undergraduates, as well as faculty. But we had to kind of come up with a way to provide a little bit of extra service and outreach to our graduate school. RIT's unit for that is now known as the graduate school has only been known that since the beginning of this academic year. It was called the Office of Graduate Education before. I did have to update my slides from when I wrote them for the 2020 conference. What does the graduate school do here? They make resources available to graduate students to foster ingenuity in research, rigor in academics, and ultimate success in their programs of study, as well as in their creative and entrepreneurial endeavors. That really kind of ties in a lot of RIT's reason for being. We kind of sit at that intersection of academics, technology, entrepreneurship, and art and creativity at this campus. Colleges and departments, though, administer their own graduate programs, which leads to a very decentralized provision of graduate services. What the graduate school does is kind of serve as an umbrella organization where they don't actually administer a lot of policies, but instead they sponsor programs, workshops, and social events throughout the year, trying to build a community of graduate students on our campus, a very diverse community, a growing number of students coming here for graduate study. They support student organizations and staff, faculty, committees, and resource groups as well in better service to graduate students. And they also coordinate orientation for our new graduate students as they come onto campus each semester and at least once a year, training for new graduate TAs. Now, we don't have a large number of graduate TAs, so that's a somewhat new piece of their responsibilities. And at the library here, prior to the 2010-2011 academic year, there was really no centralized effort to coordinate resources for our graduate students. One of my colleagues began working in that capacity about a decade ago. There were some changes in responsibilities, and then somewhere along the line in 2015-2016, I inherited this role. This is a screenshot of what was then called the Office of Graduate Education website. It's now just renamed itself as the RIT Graduate School. And there's their blurb that I read before. Now let's rewind the clock a little bit to some activities that I engaged in pre-pandemic, going back to the beginning of the 2019-2020 academic year. So this would have been in August and September of 2019. During the August orientation week for all students, the then the Office of Graduate Education, now the Graduate School, held their new graduate student orientation program, which was a big 2-hour event in a large auditorium on campus. There were approximately 1,000 new graduate students asked to attend that event. You can tell that this is pre-pandemic now as I describe these conditions that have become a little unfamiliar to us. I was given a 20-minute chunk of that 2-hour block and asked to focus on academic integrity resources. I prefer to talk about library services in general at that orientation type event, but at the time, the staff over there in the Office of Graduate Education said, we really want to kind of aim this at new graduate students as emerging scholars in their disciplines. What can you do to introduce this topic of academic integrity? And fortunately enough, our library had a driving role in creating the RIT Academic Integrity webpage. So I use this as my primary source for that 20-minute orientation presentation. 4 weeks into the semester, we're now into September of 2019, we had a much smaller graduate TA orientation, which was targeted to the roughly 36 or so graduate TAs that were beginning that fall. As I said, out of 1,000 new graduate students coming, and a total population of, I think, somewhere approaching 4,000 graduate students, there's only about 30 to 35 graduate TAs. So it really is a select population at our campus. Again, I was given 20 minutes. The TA orientation ran a total of 3 hours, so it was a smaller sliver, even though it was the same real amount of time. And it focused very specifically on academic integrity in the classroom to really introduce this topic, not just as a student, but as an instructor. Okay. So the lessons that I learned from these experiences, I think you can probably guess where I'm going with this. New graduate student orientation did change. It does still say may change, reflecting that early 2020 line of thinking. Of course, it changed in ways that we didn't anticipate. But the Institute has had a strategic goal to increase graduate enrollment in total and increase the number of doctorates awarded in particular. That's pretty impactful on the library and the librarians. Graduate students do not currently pay orientation fees, so their options were constrained back before the pandemic. I don't believe that's come back on the table at this point. The question of whether to assess an orientation fee for graduate students. The library portion, I think, was very significant, despite the brevity of it. But if you look at it, I was assigned roughly 1/6 of the total orientation program in 2019, just for me to stand in an auditorium and address 1,000 new graduate students. Again, my preference was to focus more heavily on library services and what the library and the librarians can do for new graduate students, but I was asked to focus on more of the academic integrity resources, probably because there has been this identified need to really drive that message home. And my question for the presentation was, how relevant and useful before classes actually commence is receiving that message about academic integrity? Now, the orientation for new TAs is still evolving. And if I can kind of step out of 2019, 2020 and into the present day, that has actually been moved out of the graduate school and into another unit on campus to administer. So some of this information on this slide does not look like it will proceed in the way that it looked like it would a year and a half ago. I've already said that we don't make extensive use of grad TAs. The grad school has had a goal of unifying their training experience. At the time, they were beginning to explore certifying TAs under Magna Publications' 20-minute mentor program, but I'm not certain that that will be pursued, as the individual who was driving that particular initiative has actually retired from the RIT graduate school. But my role had remained fairly consistent over the years that I did participate and have at least consulted on the new TA training. The focus is really on academic integrity in the classroom, preparing grad TAs to serve as instructors. Could this be a good role for a librarian? There's positives and negatives to it. So what I did in preparing this presentation was try to get some feedback from past graduate TAs who had gone through that training program with me in the fall 2019 semester. So I created a survey in Qualtrics and distributed it by BCC email to a list of all 30 participants. So I said before it was about 3 dozen, it was actually 30. So my apologies there, I was slightly off. And that was, again, two fall semesters ago. So the number may be higher now. I had a great response rate of 40%, 12 responses out of a pool of 30 attendees. And I asked them for simple questions. Question 1, during the fall 2019 semester, how often did you refer to the Academic Integrity website? And if you recall, I showed a screenshot of that. That's our main resource here on campus for promoting academic integrity resources and training students. And then I gave them a Likert scale of options, but the responses were pretty straightforward. Half of them said they never took another look at that, and half of them said they looked at it once after the training session. Now, I also pointed out our citation guides, another thing that not only could support this population as students, but also can be something that can be introduced in their role as TAs to the undergraduate students they're working with. During the fall 2019 semester, did they refer to the citation guides on the library website? And unfortunately, only 1 out of the 12 respondents did identify that they did do that. Here is a screenshot of our citation styles guide page, kind of the main landing page there. So that's what I was really asking them about. And the survey did have links out to these pages so they could have their memories refreshed. Third question, during the fall 2019 semester, did you refer to the Citation Tools and Managers page on the RIT Library website? This is something that's very near and dear to me. Even before I became the Graduate Services Coordinator, I invested a lot of time in preparing materials to train our campus in the use of EndNote and Zotero and Mendeley. And I have maintained some guides on our LibGuides installation on how to use those. I've provided in-person training for those tools in the past. I'm now providing video-based, on-demand, streaming video-based training for those tools now. So I kind of wanted to check in with a small sample of graduate students to see how good is this stuff? And did a little better there. 3 of the respondents said yes, they did go to that Citation Tools and Managers page to get resources on using Zotero or EndNote or Mendeley. And the final question, during the fall 2019 semester, did you consult with a subject librarian from the RIT libraries? That would be a college liaison librarian, whether it was me or one of the other members of my team. And sadly, only 1 of the 12 students said that they had done that. Here's a screenshot of our kind of stub page that links out to the Citation Manager LibGuides. So we have this kind of index of LibGuides from the citation support webpage. The user would just click Citation Tools and then be shown this list. Okay, so a little bit of analysis of my brief and highly unscientific survey responses and how future academic integrity instruction for grad TAs might be informed. So the bottom line is that there was only modest use by the graduate TAs surveyed of the academic integrity and citation tools websites. Leading me to believe, is awareness of these resources enough on its own? Should I keep coming back? Should other librarians keep coming back and constantly introducing these topics to graduate students whenever they meet with them? Perhaps the answer is yes. Should the focus in future training sessions be placed more on preparing grad TAs to understand how to introduce academic integrity as a topic in their teaching assistants? Now we're kind of crossing into the line that is fuzzier as far as how much of that responsibility can the librarian take on, because the motivations and interests of faculty who employ grad TAs is often unclear and unknown to me, particularly if I'm not the liaison librarian to the college that those faculty teach in, and that is most often the case. Most of that small number of grad TAs are actually teaching large introductory science courses. And I'm not the librarian for our College of Science, so I don't have those relationships with that particular population of faculty. In the TA training presentation, though, I do spend some time reviewing the content on the Academic Integrity website. So I do use that as a resource as well. So that's kind of where my presentation would have ended. But I'd like to bring you up to speed on what has changed since then. And of course, as you can imagine, these programs went virtual in the fall of 2020 and in the fall of this year. So what I did instead was I kind of merged two different experiences together. Instead of a 20-minute presentation to a big auditorium full of graduate students, where I then invite them at the end to sign up for an in-person workshop that will allow me for 45 minutes or so to really drill down on libraries, services, and resources. I combined that into one 15-minute video, and you would be amazed how much more brevity you can work into a lesson when you're trying to get it into a format of a YouTube video. So the virtual new graduate student orientation program had a 15-minute video from me that was based on this former in-person workshop where I gave a tour of the library's website and our main LibGuides page supporting graduate students and explained the various services and resources we had at a very high level. And what changed with TA training was I mentioned that it was moved out of the graduate school and it went instead to our instructional designers, who one of whom created a custom LMS module that would take the place of this in-person 3-hour TA training session. So I assisted her with suggestions and edits for the parts of the module that were based on my previous content when these graduate TA programs were held in person. But there's a little bit more distance now between me and the new graduate TAs, so that's the downside. Now, the other thing that will be changing is that my colleagues in the library are ready to start reviewing our web content next calendar year. The Academic Integrity website that I've mentioned and showed a screenshot of, that's slated to be updated. There's a number of things on that page that are beginning to pass out of date and maybe be less relevant. So a number of my colleagues are working on that side project. Now, the citation guides website that I showed a screenshot of and mentioned specifically in the survey that I did of the attendees of my in-person grad TA training session, that's slated to be replaced altogether. We had devised a homegrown system of presenting examples of citations and bibliographic formats in the APA, MLA, and IEEE styles, and it became far too much to maintain. So we're going to be replacing that most likely by linking out to other resources. My citation management guides will live on. So I'm providing training for things like getting started with Zotero, getting started with Mendeley, getting started with EndNote via video-based tutorials as well, trying to make the content briefer, more concise, and modular so that students can learn at their own pace. Now, you notice that I've said that my colleagues will be working on these projects. I think I'm going to try my best to keep them informed of the needs of graduate students, but they are also, all of them, aware of the needs of graduate students on our campus, because we all do work with grad students collectively. But next summer, I'm going to have to circle back to whatever gets redone and updated and replaced, and adapt any materials that I have for orienting new graduate students and new grad TAs in preparation for the coming academic year. So that's kind of where things stand. I think this was, and then just a little reference here that portions of this presentation were based on a previous presentation of mine, just to inform everyone. I think the opportunities are there for me to continue to work in the virtual realm. And I have personally found that to be pretty appealing as far as providing orientations and training for our new graduate students. So in a way, the closures of the pandemic and the changes that have resulted from that have really kind of made me reconsider this in ways that I would not have been able to guess in March of 2020. So those have been my experiences, and glad to share them with you today.
Thank you very much, Roman. That was an excellent presentation. If anyone has questions for Roman, please feel free to put them in the chat. I did want to follow up, Roman, with what you said. I know here at UGA, we've also been amazingly surprised with the shift into the online environment for graduate workshops. I would do sessions with my two schools, and in person, I'd have 10 or 15. And the minute we shifted everything to Zoom, we had 70 to 80 people for each session. And that was across all the colleges. So we've all been incredibly surprised. I think just shifting to a virtual format is just more amenable with everyone's schedules, with classes and TAs. So it sounds like you've had a very similar experience there.
I have. The one thing that I'm lacking in comparison to your example is the metrics, because it's been somewhat taken out of my hands. So I am unable to see attendance that the graduate school gets, or I'm unable to see how many times students have viewed things on the graduate school's YouTube channel. I mean, it's kind of offloaded outside of the library's own web environment. So, but I can keep track of who's watching my other instructional presentations that are not exclusively aimed at graduate students, but highly relevant to graduate students, such as how to get started using Mendeley, which reminds me that that's something I have to redo in the near future.
Very good.
Roman, I have a question. And hello, everyone. I should have said earlier, I'm acting as the chat moderator today. We have so few people with us right now. If you would like to unmute to ask your question, please do that. If you'd like to type it in the chat, please do that. I'm Wendy Doucette. I'm the organizer of the TLGS conference. Roman, one thing that I was wondering is, could you define what you mean? What are you putting under the umbrella of academic integrity? I assume you're putting plagiarism, and it sounds like Turnitin, but do you have more than that?
Yes, we're actually no longer supporting Turnitin through the library. So that was a long-standing issue here. We do have significant information about plagiarism and fair use, but we're also trying to connect that to things like copyright and open access as well. The way that the Academic Integrity Resources website is currently organized is that there's a section for faculty resources, which talks about best practices for introducing these topics in the instructional setting. And then there's a student resources section that talks about things like avoiding plagiarism, checking for plagiarism, and so on. So those are not, those are only separated in the organization of the website. Anybody can read any of that information, which is why I chose to use it to focus my lessons for the new TAs, because they're both students and instructors, so they could learn about how to approach this topic, how to deal with suspected violations, and so on, just at the very highest level. Consider this before you start getting involved in planning your next course or working with a faculty advisor to make those plans. But also realize that we can help you be a better student as well by relying on the same resources in another portion of this website.
And I'm wondering too, as you said you were 1/6 of the speakers there, I'm wondering who was the heavy at this event, who said, if you do this, here's repercussions. I'm assuming that was the grad school. That if you are not.
No, they kind of left me out. They kind of left me out to dry on that one, Wendy. Nobody was there to really swing the hammer. I just sort of had to gently remind them, and also at the same time say, but I'm not grading you. So it was, it made for that. That's why my reactions when I first got that request, prior to 2019, I'd go in for an even shorter presentation at new graduate student orientation, and it was very, very introductory, 10 minutes maybe. Who am I? Who are the other librarians, and what do we do? So it was presented to me as, at the time, as we're giving you twice as much time to fill, but in exchange, you have to kind of introduce this topic, and it was squishy as to whether it was really the best fit for me to do that. As somebody who also, librarians at RIT don't even have faculty status, so the likelihood of me really being involved in any sorts of decisions about how violations of academic integrity are enforced, it's not even an option for me, because I wouldn't be on any faculty committees. Okay, so Wendy's offering a quick poll. If you teach academic integrity, this is a great question. At what point? Because that's something that I've struggled with. The other question I had was, do they really want to learn about this when they just arrived on campus and they haven't even attended a class yet? Victor also posted a question. I wonder if other schools are creating more cohort groups that are not near the campus. I don't know of anything like that on my campus, but I do think that there have still, even this year, there was still some accommodations for students, international graduate students who are still unable to travel. But I don't know that they were able to put them together into cohort groups. I think it was very, I have a plagiarism LibGuide, yeah. And that's kind of where the academic integrity webpage rose. We thought it would rise above the level of a LibGuide, that it would be used more broadly across campus. But that's something that needs to be reassessed at this point, now that that particular website has become a little dated. Yes, how theses and dissertations will be viewable forever. So any violations of academic integrity, cheating and plagiarism, somebody's going to notice it. And I'm sure many of us have heard of such things happening on our own campuses. I know it's happened at RIT, not recently, but in the past.
I'm just wondering if people could kind of give us the hand or the whatever you want in the Zoom thing of, do you teach AI to grad students, and do you feel comfortable doing it? I realize that's two separate questions. And I don't see any little markings going up. So,
Well, I have to put up mine because, of course, that was what my presentation was about. Victor also says that graduate students are invited. Librarians are invited by different colleges to offer academic integrity workshops for grad students, especially those with high numbers of international students. And yes, I've actually done that as well. Victor, wherever you are, I have done the same. Writing Center does it. Yes, that is perhaps not uncommon as well. Someone else is in the process of creating a module about academic integrity for graduate nursing students. But it's not done across the board. So it is targeted, which is another interesting, and that's another experience I've had as well, is trying to target a lesson on academic integrity to a specific population of graduate students. It fell outside of the scope of my presentation, but it is something that I've engaged in, and I have done in person and now also virtual.
Interesting.
Graduate students at UCF, is that Central Florida, I assume, have to complete an academic integrity web course, which
yes,
actually
that was the University of Central Florida. Sorry for my typo there.
Thank you, Corinne.
Yeah.
And that sounds analogous to how graduate TA training moved here at RIT, because the new grad TAs have to complete a course in our LMS. That has not been deployed to all graduate students, though. And then, yeah, decentralized campuses, graduate students across the university may not have an orientation. And in fact, we didn't until the current dean of the graduate school was the one who sort of originated this, again, about 4 to 5 years ago. So, and unfortunately, she will be retiring next summer. She's been a longtime RIT, first faculty member, then a department head, and then dean of the graduate school. And it will be a loss to see her move on. But it was really her who said, in order for us to break through these barriers of having decentralized graduate studies programs in various colleges and departments where nobody feels connected to RIT, let's have at least a few hours to have everybody gather together pre-pandemic and get a broad presentation about what it means to be a graduate student at this institution.
Roman, I was very surprised in your slides when you took the position. You even asked the question, is this something that a librarian should be doing? Because for me, I feel 100% yes. And by that, I don't mean that it's my responsibility to teach it, but I do think that I'm part of the united front of the university saying, here are our values, and here's some stuff that you need to be aware of up front.
That's a wonderful way to conceive of it, and I very much appreciate that. I think my hesitancy came through in my answer to your other question, which was enforcement based more than comfort with the material. Of course, I believe very strongly in this and support that mission of our university as well. It was just, but I'm not the one enforcing any sort of policies. I can only point to the policy and say, this is what could happen if your department finds out.
Okay, I'm putting something in the chat just up front because I don't have time to drop everything in at the moment. Any other questions or comments for Roman? Or anything on this topic? I don't mean to put the pot lid down on this. I just want to see if anybody has anything else that they want to get in. Okay, then I'm going to ask everyone to, as you exit, if you could please just type in where you heard about today's session. And I'm going to be putting on the GradLib list. So many people are mailing me just today, in fact, to ask, I'm interested in the TLGS conference. How much does it cost? It is online. It will be on Zoom, so it will be free. I have gone to online conferences and people have charged me money, but frankly, I do not see why. So this one costs nothing. So I am hoping that all of you can afford that and you will come and present and attend and discuss, and it will be the great conference that it usually is.
It's fantastic because travel has been severely curtailed at my institution. But yes, I appreciate the opportunity to finally deliver this presentation. And I genuinely missed out on that particular experience, which I'm sure would have been just as informative as the 2018 conference that I did attend and was a part of a panel discussion at. So this is a one-of-a-kind organization, and it's not sponsored by any alphabet soup organization. It's a ground-up librarian-founded, librarian-focused group, and it's wonderful to reach out to colleagues this way and share information this way.
It is a great conference, and we will be having it live again in the future. It's intended to be a live conference, but having had it be canceled 5 days before it took place after 2 years of planning was very painful. And I was not wishing to go through that pain again, and COVID's still here, but let's all hope for 2024. Okay, and Sheila, I'm going to stop talking so you can do your last piece.
Thank you. I was going to say, Victor did have one last comment about what our discussion had been, and he said it's kind of like what Wendy said, enforcement is really not just the college, but academia as a whole as they publish. So just some thoughts to think about as we leave. But I just wanted to say thank you for joining us today. And if you have questions or comments for Roman, you can reach him at his email address, which I'm going to drop in the chat. Oh, you just did it too? Okay. Oh, there you go. You're ahead of me. Excellent. So yes, we hope to see you at the TLGS conference in March. And after processing, this is going to be, as we've mentioned, posted on YouTube. You can find it by just typing in TLGS libraries on YouTube. Thank you everyone for coming. Have a wonderful rest of your December. And as we wind down 2021, and we look forward to seeing you in 2022. So thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.